It's just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded. David, would you mind hitting the gutting?
Oh yeah, I did yesterday.
Here he comes, he's got it.
See you union job?
This is the guy who's made him alone yesterday, right?
Yeah.
It's shared work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And is, do we know if Evelyn's on?
She's on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you in person and also via Zoom. And welcome whoever may be from the public to this executive committee meeting of the trustees. I'm going to start off with by reading our statement of affirmation relative to diversity, and that the trustees of the Boston Public Library reaffirm our commitment to racial equity and to principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. More broadly, the library is formally committed to becoming an anti-racist organization in response to systemic racism, inequity, and injustice prevalent in our society. We acknowledge also that the Boston Public Library Central Library stands on the land that was once a water-based ecosystem providing sustenance for the indigenous Massachusetts people, and is a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. We're committed to land acknowledgement for all locations at which we operate. We reaffirm this commitment to set the context for our planning, deliberations, and public engagement which take place from the spirit of welcome and respect found in the model Free to All. We'll have a roll call, please.
Sure. Arana Ortiz?
Here.
Bradley?
Here.
Cronin?
Here.
Douglas?
Here.
Josina Forey is absent. Hyler?
Here.
Morning.
Morning.
And Hawkins is.
Good to see you. Not in Road Brothers.
We have a quorum.
In the summer.
Great, thank you. Before we get in, we have a full agenda today, and again, it's great to see all of you in person. But I want to acknowledge the fact that this committee, we've added new members to the committee. We've had our long-standing Cheryl has been a member of this executive committee, and John and Ben Bradley. And we've added new people as well. And we're going to talk about that. I'm not going to call their names, but the purpose is that we really, we are in a time of tumultuous change. And as trustees and as stewards of this institution, we not only have a fiduciary and operational responsibility, we have a responsibility to really look forward, to really think about who we are, where we're going, and what's the role, and to be able to support and be in alignment with the staff to move forward. All of you, a big thank you, because you indicated we really need time to take a deeper dive into issues. We need time to exchange points of view, to really do not only the current work in terms of operations and management and fiduciary oversight, but to think about the future of this organization. And today we'll be talking about that. The good news is that we have chairs of each of the committees that are now members of this executive committee, and we will be meeting on occasion to have those deep conversations. So we'll be David and I have talked, we've come up with a list of things. Some of you have suggested some ideas that you'd like to take a deep dive, and we'll go through those items as well. Anything I missed, David?
No, I think this might actually be the first standalone meeting of the executive committee as a body. I know there's an executive session to follow in closed meeting, which we'll take a vote on in a moment. But the other purpose of the executive committee is to do the approval business of the library between meetings of the full board. So we'll be getting to that. And then I think as Chair Douglas has said, there are some topics lined up that we will want your input on. Should those be handled with the full board, which is now a larger group and a little bit more challenging to schedule, or fewer of the full board meetings, but more of executive committee meetings in order. I mean, so it's a case of, are these the right topics, and what is the right cadence and mixture of meetings in order to deliver that level of participation and guidance that the chair is looking for and that the library needs, but to do it in a way that is manageable and respectful of everybody's schedules.
So I wanted to start that, and we'll certainly will have more time to dialogue and conversation. So I'm going to set the context that this is, and once we get through the approval of the minutes and vote on these items from the Finance Committee, we're going to be talking to each other. So I look forward to that. So may I have everybody received the minutes to the meeting? And could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And
Second.
thank you. All in favor, show of hands?
If I could just ask you separately, Evelyn, where you're virtual?
Yes.
All set?
Great. Thank you. Let me turn it over to Vice Chair Evelyn Arena-Ortiz to talk about, also the Chair of the Finance Committee, to put forward these votes.
Thank you, and my apologies for not being there, but I'm coming out of a COVID situation. I think you all wanted me away. I have a couple of votes here. One, it's a delegation to the Finance and Audit. We've done this before for the newspaper image processing project, and I'm going to have David talk about it. And the other one is approval for the research collection move vendor, which I'm going to have Beth. Beth, I don't know, Beth in the room or Beth it's online?
Yeah.
Okay. And then Beth can talk about those. So let's start with the newspaper image project. Dave, can you just give us a little bit more information?
So the library has really been doing digitization work for a good 12 to 15 years at this point. One of the areas where we have been slower to address is in the local newspapers, both the ones in our own collection as well as the ones that are from institutions around the state, and we do get state funding to cover that. And so our repository team is ready to tackle this. Newspapers and newspaper articles are classified as complex objects because an article is spread across multiple pages. It's not a simple article scan. And we will be contracting with an outside party to do the physical scanning, which will then live in the library's repository. And we're almost ready to, I think, make the selection. And rather than have to wait till the full board meeting, we'd like this authority delegated by the executive committee to Finance and Audit. So as soon as the vendor's selected, it'll be ready to be approved by them. And then we can just get started.
Are the entire newspapers digitized, or is it you select articles?
No. So in this project will digitize the entire newspaper because it is real important that you see the article in the context of the published item, whether it's weekly, monthly. Right. And, in some cases, ads are part of the newspaper. They might not be relevant to the substance of an article, but they are absolutely relevant to the overall experience of what was going on at that point in time, at that point in history for a given community. And so, yes, it will be the whole newspaper.
Is this just the Herald Traveler?
No, this is not. This is all of the hundreds of local newspapers from the history of the state.
Yeah.
Infamous Boston Tab.
So question, David.
Yeah.
Question. So is the intent of the project it's not, it's more, I mean, because I mean, you have newspapers that are coming out every day, right?
Right.
So, go
These
ahead.
are newspapers that were printed on paper and circulated over the
Oh,
19th
these
and
are
20th
paper.
century. Yes,
You have stacks
physical-
of newspapers
Yes.
in a storage area.
yes,
Or any online version.
exactly.
Okay.
So the ones that have online versions now, you're not digitizing.
We're not there, they were what are called born digital.
Okay.
Whereas these were not.
And then how far back?
Yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head, but we have newspapers, Beth, that go back to 17,
Era, right.
yeah.
Yeah, it depends how condition they're in.
Right, but also, I don't know if this project is specifically around the so many of these newspapers were microfilms, but this is actually digitizing the microfilm, so that.
Okay.
So it is a process whereby people can access it rather than having to come into the library. This is actually in our digital repository.
I was going to say, the most important question for those of us who went to college here is the Phoenix.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you.
They had it on radio.
The Phoenix, the Tab, the Improper Bostonian, the,
Just a reporter, I'm just gonna throw it out there.
I think this is an awesome project.
it is the single most common requested thing from our partners around the state. Can you help us digitize?
Right.
When people go back and look for their family and their history in towns, this makes it so much easier. Just amazing. I think it's a great project.
And when do we start this?
We would start this as soon as we get the vendor selected. And
We haven't started it yet.
well, we have been doing piecemeal work. This is a next phase. I think it's a large enough amount that I don't want to call it a pilot, but it is, this will be decades of work.
They focused on the most important though. They got that done.
You need a vote?
So Evelyn?
Oh, sorry.
But
Yeah, no,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I have another question. So, and then the accessibility would be through our, I don't know, through our catalog, through bpl.org, through where?
So the digitized objects will be directly accessible at digitalcommonwealth.org, which is the statewide repository run by BPL, but linked to both our website and our catalog. So if
Okay.
you're doing a search for, I'll just continue with Cheryl's example of the Phoenix, if you were doing a search, you could look that up in the catalog. And just like our other digitized records, there would be a URL in there. You click on the link and it takes you to the object served up via digitalcommonwealth.org.
So are you going to be not only newspapers at the library, but will some be coming from some of the local newspapers, say Springfield or?
Yes, in the long run, because this is a statewide effort under the Library for the Commonwealth. Thank you, Linda. That we execute against. The thing to watch out for is which ones do we have full rights to do this on, and which ones do we have limited rights because the paper is still in business and is producing perhaps their own digital content. But the end goal is for all of the newspapers that are held by the library to ultimately be available through this mechanism, as well as being able to do intake for our statewide partners across the state.
Good. So can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Second.
All right.
All right.
All right, the
All in
next
favor?
one,
All in favor? Aye.
aye.
Great, thanks.
And can I ask you, Evelyn, separately?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So moved.
All right, and then the next one, Beth, can you just give us the research collection? The move?
Sure. So we have, over the course of the last 8 years, needed to move collections off-site for various construction projects, including the Boylston Street building. When we were doing this renovation, collections were moved to our off-site facility, COBAC, the City Boston Archival Center. We also have collections that are stored in some cases with a vendor because we didn't have space to move to. The rare books and manuscripts renovation required a fair bit of displacement within our research library stacks for us to be able to run all, because it is all of the separate mechanical systems, we had to run ducting, from the roof down to the fourth floor where that is located, and some collections were displaced as a result. This RFP that we issued was to do multiple things. It was to return any collections that we had stored up with a vendor, which is obviously a financial proposition as well as an access proposition, back to library property, but also then for us to do what we would call a major shift of our collections. Because collections were stored in pockets, it makes it very difficult for our staff to service. And so we want to actually reintegrate all of those collections within certain call number ranges to have them be, once again, accessible and on-site. This is a really big undertaking. It's about 31,000 linear feet. This is not funded through the library funds. This is funded as this is the final piece of the capital project money. So this is actually city money that was allocated for this. And so we issued an RFP in November. We've selected a vendor, William B. Meyer, who came in under budget, which was fantastic for us to do this work. They have proposed that this will take approximately 3 months. And so we'd like to start in the beginning of 2023 with an expectation that we would complete sometime by April of 2023 and have these collections on site. So the contract itself, you can see the vote that's there is to contract with them for packing, moving, shifting, shelving. There's also a little bit of cleaning that's involved, cleaning shelving and things of that sort to make things ready for collections.
So this will be here at Copley.
It will be here at Copley, but it's also moving things from our archival center to Copley, and in some cases unboxing things that have remained boxed and shelve them also at the archival center as well, so they're accessible for our pullers.
Hey, Beth, were they one of the, because I know we've done a lot of these moves. Were they one of the, have they done work for us before?
They've done a lot of work for us.
Okay.
So they were involved in a number of the moves. My predecessor, Laura Ermsher, worked with them to get the collections off-site. So in many cases, they were the ones who did the packing and
Wasn't that one of the facilities?
they, I believe, were involved long ago with the moving of the Norwood facility. They were involved with the move into Kovac initially. And then a lot of the work that was done to shift these collections around, they did. And so they are very familiar with the collections going out. And we felt they gave an excellent proposal for them to come back.
Do you trust them with this?
We do, and we're using them actually. They were the winning vendor for the cleaning of the founding research collection RFP as well. So they are on site actually, or they might have just finished fairly recently. So we have a lot of experience with them, which also I think is a real source of kind of confidence for us.
They have not been our exclusive partner for this type of work, but they've probably been the most common vendor that has been the winning vendor for this type of work over the last 10 years.
Okay. So can I get a motion to approve the research collections move vendor?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Evelyn,
Yes.
thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Beth?
Pardon?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Good to see you. This next agenda item, let's take a little time to talk about this, but let me just tell you the backdrop. One of the things that when we think about urban libraries and the future of urban libraries, lots has changed. And I try to stay up online about what's happening. David shares with me some of the conference, and I know many of you send me articles that you read about what's happening in this particular space. The other piece is that with our move to human services, the focus of our work in alignment with what the mayor is doing is significant. So as trustees, You may have had the same experience that I have when people say, well, what about this? And what's the background? And I know that on other boards that I'm participating, there's work and background information, program information, so that we're all up to speed on things. I would like you to have, feel as comfortable asking questions, knowing what's happening, as not, as much as you want to learn and to know about what's happening in the library. Yesterday, the special collections was here and we did a behind the scenes tour. And although people have been involved with the library for a very long time, their eyes were open. They saw things that they hadn't seen before. And so this is a conversation where we, David and and some of you individually, I've talked to about what would you like to see happen? What kind of conversations should we be having as a full board? And then what, as committee chairs, people here. At this time, I just want to say, acknowledge Christian and Navjeet are here as trustees, and we'll be talking a little bit more about what their role will be. So they're here as part of the executive committee because this question of committees versus full involvement, this really is something that we have to determine in the conversation. How much, though you could spend your life at the BPL, as some people have done, or what's the mechanism for you to stay engaged and be informed?
I'll start the conversation by saying a couple things, which I think I've said to Priscilla, but just also as someone who also runs a nonprofit and has a board. I think, number one, what I would respectfully suggest, and I personally think this is critical, is that the board meetings are actually too in the weeds. And what that, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, staff presentations are too in the weeds. I think it loses a lot of us, and we don't have an opportunity to ask questions and really engage in a conversation. And I really, my own view is that we should cut back in the large board meetings. We should cut back, frankly, on the content that's in the weeds. And I think the reality is it's great to have staff present, and you should, I think you should continue to do that. But I think you really need to say to people that we're all coming into this every couple of months with day jobs. So we don't, I know for myself, my eyes start to glaze, candidly, my eyes glaze over about halfway through some of the presentations because I'm lost, because I don't have enough information. So I would think that if we can design the full board meetings to allow more conversation, mindful of the fact that it's a public meeting, obviously, but I still think there's an opportunity to have a good conversation around issues, which I think will be more helpful to us than the board meetings, which I think are largely performative, so not as helpful, number one. And then number two, I just want to say, I completely agree about the need to shift some more onto smaller committees. A 15-person board is really, it's important to have that for a public entity like this, but it's not really a workable governing board. So I think that just to, I think I totally agree with that.
So some of those conversations that are happening, the content could in fact be addressed at the committee level and the staff presentations at the committee level. Is that, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe even they're not so in the weeds, like for my own, maybe I'm just slower than everybody else, but.
But the weeds includes board approval of things we're doing today, right? Doesn't that count in the weeds?
Well, there was nothing in the weeds to me that was uncalled for today. Those weeds, it's just that there's an efficient way to present to tee up a topic. And most topics don't, and I think actually it's useful for staff to learn how to present topics very efficiently. And I just think sometimes that doesn't happen.
I think you're onto something, because I will tell you, Evelyn runs a really good finance audit committee, and we do get into the weeds, because that's what we're supposed to do for the board.
Right.
And then we get the recommendations to the board. I guess an example of this would be Beth's presentation today, and this is the only thing I'm gonna, it wasn't a presentation, but with the research collection newspaper, there's gonna be a real benefit. It's not just to people that use the library, the efficiency, the ease. It's also us understanding the savings, what this means to the library going forward is there going to be an opportunity to reallocate expenses? And I do wish we knew a little bit more about that. When we do a project, what does that mean financially for the institution? I'd love to see that. And that could be taking place at the committees as well. But it would have been nice, this is not critical, Beth. I'm just saying, but would have been great. This is going to save us over the next 5-10 years, such and such an amount of money.
Why is this a good thing?
Yes.
Good thing, not just, don't get me wrong, everybody that uses the library, of course, is going to make life a lot easier, but is there also a fiduciary kind of role that is also going to be played here? And so I think that's kind of a key, but I think the committees is a place where we should get down into the weeds. But then there should be this presentation, as Cheryl's saying, that allows us to, why are we doing this? Not just to make the ease up, but also it's going to help us free up resources or opportunities other places.
Yeah, I think.
One more question.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I'm just listening.
I was just to say, I think this is really good feedback. I think the shift certainly from a 9-person to 15 that has happened over the last 2 years really, is part of the reason why this is the right time to be having this reset moment. I'm not trying to be defensive about, but I think our approach has been to share more information in order to keep trustees as informed as possible, but maybe there's a different way to deliver that.
Yeah, maybe John's making a good point as I'm thinking about it, which is, it's not that the weeds bother me, it's that some of what is said doesn't really seem as relevant to me as the topic that we are being confronted with.
Right.
And the decision we have to make. I think it's just a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, so the relevance, the key word for me is the relevance, setting the context. So again, as we think strategically as, why would we even want to digitize these newspapers? What's the impact on people? And how is it being used? And what's the difference that we're making in people's lives by having this available? How does this tie into democracy, right? The key pillars of what this library is supposed to be about.
Yeah, and I think in the case of some of our votes, I think you use the word performative, but they are your fiduciary responsibility. And so I think we get focused on, okay, here's what the actual vote, the execution of that vote needs to be about, without giving the broader context ahead of time about how this fits into democracy or access to information.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I agree with Cheryl and John. I think the votes, it's a requirement, it's a fiduciary obligation, but there's not a lot of framing of why they matter and what's the broader context. So I think that would be helpful.
And maybe this list of topics which came out of your meetings last year is a good way to ask for 2 through 5. Where are these the right topics? We don't have to do them if they're no longer the right topics, and at which committee level, and what is the right way to frame the conversation for you as trustees, so that it is relevant, meaningful, and important for the library.
The other thing I just want to say is that I also think we need to be mindful of your role as, the CEO and the leader. I mean, I think we're not managers over you, we're governance. And there is such a difference between governance and management. So sometimes I'm worried that you feel, I think it's great to inform us of things,
Yes.
but I also think we can be respectful where you don't have to. There are just some things that are in your prerogative. And I think we should be mindful of that.
So let's take a look at these topics that are up here. One of the things, the idea of having invited guests Why would we have invited guests? Well, there are libraries that are dealing with some of the issues, and.
I don't mean to interrupt you at all, but
Go ahead, please.
Just said it.
The governor, yeah.
And before we go through these, because I think
Okay.
this will set the tone, you know, I look at our role as advisory and fiduciary, that we're here to mind the store, make sure management does stay with the message and mission and vision, and we do it in a way that's responsible of the enormous amount of resources that are put behind here. Is that what everybody else feels, you know, our role is? I mean, I guess, again, we've not revisited this in a long time. And I would say when I first started, we got into a lot of minutia because every dollar counted. Where now we're in a different situation, you know, 10 years later, that allows us a little bit more flexibility and freedom, but.
We had moments of crisis through that period.
Right, yeah, a couple of them. But that they haven't happened again, not wood. There's no wood anymore. But am I right to kind of assume, what do we see, I guess, as executive committee, the role of a trustee? I guess.
Say that again, what you said you see the role as.
Advisory, making sure we're staying on track with the mission. But the fiduciary role to me is a really important.
And oversight, generally.
What's that?
Oversight.
Yeah, oversight
Yeah,
of
but
the.
not oversight of management.
Yeah, no
That's-
one like the
that's-
board that does that.
Yeah, it's demoralizing to the leader, to the
So it's more
management
this
leader.
balance of advice when you come and present, but to me, it's about, as we get up to date, and kind of what we're talking about. We tie in, why are we doing these things to continue the mission of the library, and we cover that from both the mission that you talked about, the democracy, the components of that,
Right.
but also that fiduciary. And I think if we're able to kind of have those two, you know, then I think we're doing our job.
And so when I, said the role, we are stewards of this institution, we know what that means. And stewardship has to do with the current operations and the fiduciary, the values, making certain that this institution is strong and adheres to that, and that we're working in a support, I like the word, in alignment with the staff. So that's our role. What's changed is the fact that, and we're going to talk about this, is that we're moving into a strategic planning process. You know that we have had in place a roadmap. So we really are at a nexus, a pivot point, where we need to, the trustees leading this effort, move us into, it's still governance, but it's more hands-on than, it's a more hands-on role.
Yeah, strategic planning is a board function.
Yeah,
I think that's
I agree with
totally
that.
appropriate. With
Well, they come in, but
Because-
I guess I'm in agreement. You come in with what you're thinking of.
This is the question. I
Yeah,
think.
that's the-
Yeah, I think you come in, your management team, because I don't know what Beth knows.
Yeah, we don't.
You know, I don't pretend to. But then you come to us and we say, look, we have a strategic plan, this is where we want to take the library. And I guess as a board, we're supposed to sit and hopefully listen and say, yeah, this fits into the strategic plan, and have you thought of this, or have you looked at this from our wealth of knowledge to add guidance and advice. But at the end of the day, I'm with Cheryl, board's not to manage.
But is it, okay, so to clarify then, in terms of as we talk about a strategic plan, are we saying the board is doing the strategic plan?
Well,
No, it's
Christian,
I know, but
yeah.
Christian is helping to lead that, but go ahead, Christian.
Right, I mean,
Yeah.
strategic plans are generally led by the board, and then at some point you work with senior leadership, right? That's.
I think there are two
I think it
philosophies.
reflects-
I don't know.
I don't,
agree with
yeah.
Do you feel differently about this?
I think this is exactly the question that we together need to wrestle with. I think I have seen nonprofit organizations where it's management and leadership that's primary in dialogue with their board. And I've seen nonprofit organizations where it's much more of an equal partnership between board and senior management. I am not 100% clear on what is the best practice, what is the right mode for us, because I think streams of either lead to bad places.
Yeah, I think maybe we're going to get to the
Yes, let's
plan
go into
later, but we can go there right now. So I'm really excited about it. I think we've got a great committee or subcommittee, whatever it is at this point, including Cheryl very graciously has joined, and
Is David on the strategic plan?
David is
committee?
definitely on the strategic committee, as is Paula and Joe and Jose. So we have a really great group, and we're continuing to build out the committee. And at least my view is that what that group should be doing is thinking through the big questions of what an urban library should be like in the future, creating a sort of straw man of questions to put to the broader board and work through it. And I think it should be a trustee-driven process with input from management. I think that's the way that we're thinking about the committee, and we're starting with thinking through the scope of what the strategic planning committee is going to be doing. I think we want to create an output that is actually useful, that's sufficiently specific and helps us execute on actual goals and is not just a sort of lofty esoteric thing. So I mean, there's a lot of work to do, but this hasn't really been formally done in over 10 years. And I think the desire is to try to put something to paper that would really help elevate the strategy of the library.
I guess I'm not 100% on board with that, to be quite honest with you.
Which piece of?
The piece of board directing. If I had my board of my companies tell me this is where you're heading and taking a company. Okay.
Well, it wouldn't be like that. I mean, there's no such thing as operating without.
No, there's conversations that I think that management has that boards really don't completely understand and may look at it as something that, all I'm saying is I don't disagree with having the board engaged, but I think the beginning stages of putting together a strategic plan should come from management, and then you have a combination of the management putting together what their thoughts are on a strategic plan to the board, and then we access that there. I think having it directed at the top is going to be, and then secondly, you have a CEO, and if you have that kind of conversation, at the end of the day, you know, someone may raise their hand and think out loud, and
I think just to be clear, the reality is that David has been involved every step of the way.
I'm not arguing that point. I'm not.
And I think management's very directly involved in everything that we're doing. So I don't think it's the case that the board is sort of imposing in isolation its views of what should happen. It seems like management. David, you can speak to it, but
I'm with you, Chris, and I think we got a great point here, but I think we're here now. And if this is a precedent that sets up, depends on who the board members are, how much they want to get engaged. I'm just saying, I just feel like being a former CEO, that it would be a challenge if I had the board directing, sitting down in a conversation with my staff saying, hey, by the way, why don't we look at doing this, doing that? And sometimes board members can lead us down a path that spends a lot of time on something that the management knows is not going to go anywhere, and they can't really say no if you're in that kind of a meeting. That's all.
You're saying board, but this is a committee of the board.
Same thing.
Same thing, yeah.
So when you're saying board, you mean?
The committee of the board.
All committees are an extension of the board.
It's an extension of you.
Well, you know, they would present their views on what an overall strategic plan is and then share it with the board, which would comment and advise and consent, you know, I mean, I think that's fine.
But I think John's point, and interesting, those of us who have functioned as CEOs, I think, are on this side of the ledger. I think all these points are valid, and I think it's worth us thinking about and sort of maybe just, because I do think it's critical that the CEO who you until the CEO is no longer here, we have to value the CEO, frankly, more than any of us, in my opinion. And I'm a little bit troubled if David isn't totally comfortable or thinks this isn't the best way to handle this.
Yeah,
process.
I mean, just to be clear, my coordination with David has been such that David makes the edits to the agendas that I send to.
Yeah, that's what.
I don't think that's a beef.
I'm not,
Can I-
by the way, Chris, this is not.
Can
Oh, Evelyn, oh.
can I ask a question? Because, I mean, we have all these committees, right? And then there is library representation, and actually David, sits, David or a member of his staff sit in these committees. So, the conversations are not happening in a vacuum. Everything is happening, in collaboration. So I don't feel that this board imposes things to David or to the staff. It's more of a collaborative conversation, depending on the topic.
Yeah, but the one thing I would say to you is, finance and audit is a different thing than anything else the board does. So boards clearly, under any nonprofit rules, have specific responsibility for finance and
Yes,
audit.
absolutely.
So from that perspective, the board has a lead role. The same is not, that's not the case with everything else.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's why I don't think you can, yeah.
I also think, yes, several of us have worked in the private sector, several of us have worked in the nonprofit sector.
I've done both.
Yes. And the other dimension to our institutional reality is that we are also a municipal entity.
Right.
Which, in germane to the issues of governance and strategic planning, puts a lens on how this has to be done differently than it would be in either a pure private or pure nonprofit organization.
David, you're still not answering the question though, of what do you think about how the current strategic planning thing is structured?
I think this will be fine. I think we're working it out. So it's not like there is a charted course at this point. In fact, that really ought to be the first task of the smaller configuration of the committee that Christian has agreed to lead at Priscilla's invitation. And yes, there will need to be other members of that, including some staff members and including some other community members, probably. But I think this is the right time to do it.
Right.
B, it has to be a collaboration between the trustees and management. That's happening in practice. This conversation does tell me there is a range of philosophies of governance when it comes to the role of the trustees of the Boston Public Library. That's a question that perhaps we ought to formally address before we get deeper into strategic planning.
I agree with all that. I guess I don't really see why it's a problem to have a collaborative group, including trustees and management, try to come up with a new strategic plan as we did over 10 years.
It's not.
I don't think it's a
That's not a problem.
The devil will be in the details. There will likely be topics that come up where the board might feel one way and David and his management team will say, great idea, but here's why it doesn't work, and just.
Kristen, I think, I'm being completely frank here, the idea that David is in agreement with the way you guys are looking at it's fine and good enough for me. What I'm saying is like, you set precedent with sometimes board interactions, and as the board turns over, and you may have a completely different Kristen here 2 years from now saying, hey, you know what? We've always, no, what I'm saying is, this is, David, I've been through this. Depending on the board members you have, it's the engagement of how much engagement they want, how much do they want to get into running what you're doing, and you push them back saying no, but trustees, and so it's that balance, but you guys seem to be in good shape. I'm just saying, like, genesis of this, where the ideas and concepts come from, and if you have an open dialogue with management and the committee, fantastic, and your people feel great about that, and they feel good.
Yeah, but I think that guardrail of where we do not want to stray into is really, really important. And I think you all know me well enough to know that I would not be shy about saying, this is an area that really is the domain of management and running the library.
And I can't speak as to future Christians, but I think anything that you propose will have to be supported by David and Paula. It's effectively David and Paula have a veto over anything that gets presented to the board from my perspective.
Who's Paula?
So so Paula Sakey is the executive director of the fund.
The fund,
And
Paula.
has been one of the people nominated to be on this strategic planning committee or subcommittee. We have not yet decided who the other senior members of library staff need to be. I have at least two in mind, but I don't want to get ahead of process and conversations.
And the reason why we're having this conversation today and the reason why the executive committee has been called is that as a subcommittee, or however we decide, you know, we're going to work with Christian, and we'll hear from Navjeet in a minute about the work that they're going to take on. It will be reviewed by you. You'll have opportunities to weigh in.
Right.
And, you know, when we get to those.
And I think,
doing this.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Really excited.
And I think you're irreplaceable. I don't think there'll be another Chris.
I agree.
Never, ever. Yeah.
Thank you, Cheryl.
And I would too, and so it's good that we fleshed it out, because I'm gonna say, so as John reacted, I was kind of reacting the same way, because the framing, and everything is framing, you all, you know this.
Right.
But I think initially the framing was, you know, this committee and Christian and the board is gonna come up with a strategic plan, and then we're gonna reach out and talk to David. And so that was a big pause, right? Because that can't work like that.
Yeah, that's not at all.
And
what's happening in practice.
yeah, so that's why it was good to have and now it's fleshed out, we get it.
And,
But yeah.
and as a placeholder, the role of broader staff involvement.
Yes,
and
well,
the
of
role
course. I'm not just
community
saying just you.
involvement.
Yeah.
Again,
Yikes.
without boiling the ocean as well, right? You know, this has to be ultimately a document that is, what was the phrase you said? Not an aesthetic thing that just lives
Yeah, I
on
mean, we
itself.
want it to be something that is actually, that is actionable and makes an impact.
Yeah. So the next step is that in we're in the formulation stage.
Unfortunately, it's in the notes.
You know, we're in the formulation stage for this, and there's a lot of conversations that need to occur. Is there anything else for, will you tee up, Navjeet, David?
Sure. So we're actually on point number 4, and we'll come back to the topics in a minute, because I think that's where our flow of conversation went. So the two subcommittees, they may actually become full committees of the board, but right now they're perceived as committees of the executive committee. One for strategic planning that we've just been discussing. The other large project and initiative that the library is in the process of planning to undertake, right, is the renovation of the McKim building. And we've had some briefings on that. We've had a master plan developed. At the chair's invitation, Navjeet has agreed to lead the trustees committee that will provide some oversight and governance to that work. You know, we know that part of that effort will be dialogue with the city in terms of its capital plan. We know that part of that work will be dialogue with our colleagues at the Boston Public Library Fund and the philanthropic community for the private sector combinations. But there's an overarching role for the trustees to play in ensuring this most important building and treasure is on a path that aligns with the strategic values and plans of the library. And Navjeet, that's your cue.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. And I'm sorry that I'm not there in person. That is exactly right. As David and Priscilla and I have had a chance to talk about this, putting together this committee of trustees to help lead the effort with respect to the McKim project. I think, you know, there's a vital component in terms of the financing that David was going through. It's, you know, he mentioned the city, the philanthropic community, it's also the state. And that will be a big part of, honestly, the trustees' effort as well. And as we put together this committee, that will be something that we'll be keeping in mind as well, in terms of getting a capital commitment from the state. It's very exciting. You know, Christian, I think it's really tied to the strategic plan, obviously. And I think one of the things I said to Priscilla when we first talked about this is like, this can't just be about having a fancy new building or renovations to an existing building that make it even fancier. It really has to be tied to the mission of the library, the strategic plan of the library. So I envision, you know, a lot of sort of cross-fertilization of ideas and making sure that we're all working in alignment. A little bit to the conversation that we were just having around framing, I do want to say that this is entirely a collaborative effort with David and his staff. And I'm actually very eager to get to know the folks on staff who will be in, this is a big, Linda, you'll appreciate this. This is a huge construction project, right? Like there's got to be a project manager. So I think it's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a long, kind of a long-term effort. It's not going to happen overnight. So very excited, honored to be asked to help lead this committee, and looking forward to working with everyone.
That's awesome. It's great you're leading it. That's really exciting. And even as we talk about the McKim, and one of the things you mentioned, because McKim has been renovated, right? I mean, it hasn't been renovated to the full extent. And so as we think of messaging, there's 24 other libraries. Am I right? Is it 24? Right. 25, thank you.
When you're in Chinatown,
Yeah. So there's 25 other libraries. So even as we're thinking of the McKim Capital Project, it's also talking about, the other 25 and saying, 10 has been renovated already. The other 5 is in the capital planning stage. I think it's going to be critical because folks are going to be like, well, what about my library? Right. My library looks like,
it's also the messaging.
It's the message.
And the economy is really strong.
You mean the branches, right, Linda?
The branches, I'm saying the branches, which is going to be important. And it's not that the McKim project is also working on the branches, because obviously there's the capital plan with the city, right? You have all these planning things happening. And so I think it's going to be important to have a little bullet. As we're talking about McKim, we're saying, we're investing in the other branches too.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that the trustees have never, at least not in recent times, had a capital committee, capital projects committee. That's largely been, management and the city in dialogue, and we always report to the full board.
Yes,
I mean, we've always done that, and I think it's been, a continued topic of extreme interest to the trustees to ensure that we're on a path. But there's 2 arcs of the timing on this. One is that, really starting with East Boston in the 2009-2012 timeframe, continuing through the renovation of the Boylston Street building in its 2 phases of 2015 and 2016, plus the other 8 branches that have been happening in the meantime, most recently the special collections. And then the second arc is that in the 90s and 2000s, 2/3 to 3/4 of the McKim building were renovated, and what we as a body, as an institution, are left with is an unfinished renovation project, and a few areas such as the one we're sitting in that probably we need to go back to. But I think that this overall narrative is really, really powerful.
Oh, yeah, it's important, because folks will lose their mind.
No one should feel like we're turning our attention to McKim away from the community or away from our obligations to collections and services, but rather this is now, it's time. Sorry.
So you can see by the selection, and I'm going to move us along a little bit here, in terms of these 2 committees, and as I mentioned in my opening statement, is that, we're at a juncture, a pivot point, to be able to really take a deeper dive, to be able to move in a more strategic direction, to have opportunities to discuss this. I would like each one of you to have the capacity and ability to be able to talk about these issues, to feel engaged and be able to answer these questions on your own. And that's the thing that we've had individual conversations. Many of you said that you'd like to have a fuller understanding. We presented the McKim plan last May, and then it's like, well, where is it? What are we doing? What's the status of it? And so now with a trustee and a trustee-led committee in this area, we will have occasional presentations like that. And the overarching area, will be the strategic plan. So we're going to have to decide, how much, how often, when. And I don't think we're going to be able to do that today. We have to move into New business, we're not gonna be able to get to that. We're just running out of time.
Priscilla, I will tell you though, that conversation we just had with Kristen and David and the board and Linda's addition, Cheryl, everybody discussing it. Now, as you said, now we understand it completely. So this is kind of what these sessions are supposed to
Yeah.
be. So it's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just a question of clarification. These two committees, strategic planning and the McKim, these are subcommittees of the executive committee or not, or just standing committees under the board?
Currently subcommittees, but we don't really know what that means yet. I mean, we just have to figure out.
It seems like a strategic planning committee should, is there a reason it's called a subcommittee rather than a committee?
Yeah, I think it's a broad enough topic. It could be its own committee under the board.
So one of the things that I want to manage, and I know Pamela wants to manage as well, is how many formal meetings we have and what's the structure. So one of the things we don't want to put a burden on people that you have to report, you have to come together, we have to do this, we have to that. So I think by starting off as a subcommittee and then moving, once we really get fully engaged, moving to that, once we have.
My read on the distinction is it at this point in time signals which of the bodies of the board the subcommittee or committee is reporting out to. So that in both of these two cases, it is reporting back at this stage to the executive committee, not necessarily the full board every time. That's really, I think, the distinction but there's functionally.
I don't know if practically speaking, it makes much difference.
Yeah.
And if it reduces some of the formalities that are required, it's fine.
So is that
Yeah.
that's just a way to start for both of these committees, and then we can revisit this. Yeah.
So are you proposing to defer continuing
Yes.
the conversation of item 3, which is the topics and schedules? Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
So I had brought forward a new business item. Again, you can, it's your choice whether to pick this up now or defer it to a later meeting. The Urban Libraries Council has come out with a declaration of a commitment to democratic principles, largely in light of the challenges to book banning around the country, and in particular, other challenges to the role of libraries in society. I am recommending that we as a library sign on to that declaration and would ask the trustees to review and endorse that.
I think you should not ask us for a vote on that,
yes.
because I think that's your prerogative.
Yeah.
And if you're asking just for a sentiment of the whatever, I think it's a great idea.
Right.
I strongly support that. And I mean, it's so relevant today.
It is.
It's remarkable that Boston's now on the forefront, where 50, 60 years ago, we were kind of in that realm.
David, can you just review, haven't you done something separately yourself on democracy, a talk or something?
Lots of stuff. So yes, I think the public conversation series, the work that we're doing around civic engagement, we were actually talking about this yesterday in terms of it formally being part of our work as a library. And it is, we're not a neutral organization, but equally we are not partisan. And so that's kind of the nuance to deliver in terms of what we want, regardless of people's identity or political structure, is simply to be more engaged in their communities and in their civic life. And our question to ourselves as a staff is, which of our services, what of our work can facilitate that better? So you'll see more of that, both I think within the context of strategic planning, as well as in the evolution of our service offerings.
And program offerings that
Yes.
we might consider.
Yes. Partnerships with organizations such as iCivics or Generation Citizen, and there's the Tisch Center at Tufts, for example. Literacy itself, in all its forms, facilitates greater involvement in community life and civic life.
And that's one of the things that's under that list that we really can't, but we need to take a deep dive so that you're engaged and, I asked all of us to think about amplifying the efforts, leveraging it, thinking about our partnerships in terms of public engagement. So the content is there. We are doing so much. And as trustees, our goal is not to overwhelm you with stuff, but to really make certain that you're invited and that we have a calendar of things that we've shared with you, and hopefully you'll keep in finding ways to engage. But we have a role as well, which is to let you know, but it's up to you to tell us what's the balance. What's the balance, so you've been getting more things in terms of new business, you've been getting more things in your mailboxes, right? You get the digital connections, you're on the list for all of the different publications. You know that tomorrow that David is going to be presenting the state of the library via Zoom, so you know about that, so you can tune in, and I'm sure it'll be help.
When you say on the list, what do you mean?
You have this email, you've been getting new emails from people, newsletters.
I'm not sure I have.
Go ahead, it depends.
I was just saying, I send everything out.
Yeah, everything has been sent out. Okay, so that's a new business. Do we have any public comment?
There is none.
None? Okay, so I'd like to have a vote to go into executive session. The purpose of the executive session is to conduct a strategy session in preparation for negotiations for the non-union staff meeting. So may I have a motion?
So
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor?
just.
We need a roll call vote.
Evelyn?
Roll call. Yes, Cheryl.
Yes,
Can I do a roll call? I have to run through just for the record, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead.
yes,
Ryan Ortiz, says yes.
yes,
Yes.
Cronin said yes. Douglas?
Yes.
Josina Forey?
Yes.
Tyler?
Yes.
And Hawkins I'm sorry, absent. All set.
Good.
I just need to go on record and let we will not be going into a public forum after this meeting ends, so there will be no votes taken in this session, so we will not be convening. The meeting will end at this, as you adjourn it.
Good. So,
Thank you all.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
So this is a motion to adjourn, and thank you, David.
Evelyn had
We
something.
will see you on Zoom, and the trustees remain, please.
No, I have to close out of this.